As a young teenager, my main website to play Flash games on was Congregate, and this game was the gateway. 8 factions in the beginning to choose from, each one with a pro and con. The most extreme in these differences comes with the undead. +3 in halberd in exchange for -3 in archery. This gives a ridiculous damage boost in the early game. You win a battle by getting enough units to the other side, or if the time runs out, the bigger bar wins. Every army starts off with the same 3 generic units: sword, bow, and spear. Sword beats spear, spear beats bow, and bow beats sword if they have range. Wait a minute. Each army has 10 universal units, and 1 unit unique to them. The halberdier has good damage and is the slowest moving unit in the game. The slow movement here is actually helpful as it gets them to clump up. The axeman is easily the best unit in the game. It's just a really good jack of all trades. The scout and the mage are extremophile units. Scouts max out their speed and sucks at everything else. Mages are high damage range units, but they are slow attackers and frail. Longswordsmen, mounted spearmen, and mounted halberdiers are the elites of the basic units. Usually the most expensive, but also usually the best at something. Longswordsmen have the highest damage. Mounted spearmen are fast and tanky. Mounted halberdiers trade health for more speed and damage. The undead faction's unique unit is the flailer. Every single one of this unit's stats are higher than the average melee unit. In between battles, you can spend money you get to upgrade your army or buy new units. Generic army-wide upgrades like health and speed are best, but each weapon type has its own upgrades. No idea what the flailer falls under. The undead is placed in the middle of the landmass, so we border 5 of 8 other factions. This is supposed to be like a full continent, but it really only feels like a quarter one. Like, who owns that land at the bottom left? Nah, whatever. The Human Alliance is the most generic faction in the game, so they are going down first. Behold, the unstoppable tactic that I always used as a kid, the line. Just turn on autosend and grab a snack. You got the early and mid game in the bag. Every region taken down will make the other region stronger, so only the final 4 are like any real threat. If you get 20 kills, you can charge by pressing Q. This was the only thing that prevented you from just leaving the computer. If a charge is ready, autosend will be turned off automatically. The Alliance's unique unit is the Kingsguard. It's a swordsman with a bigger pair of equipment. Stats wise, it's probably the best unique unit in the game. Still kinda weak in the early game though. The Human Alliance got it way better than the Wood Elves. I honestly didn't know they had a unique unit until I was making this video. It's the Ranger. It shoots faster. It looks the exact same as a regular archer, and when you fight the Wood Elves, they don't even use the Ranger. I don't get it. When you fight all the other armies, at least one of their regions has their unique unit on standby. For some reason, the Wood Elves just don't. They are also the easiest army to beat. I beat them second cause I like having the corner. It's neat. The Orcs of the South have axe throwers. They seem to replace the Archer for this faction. They are fairly strong and can do some work. The Men of the West are vaguely Roman themed with javelin throwers, a ranged unit that is surprisingly tanky and fast moving. As a kid, I didn't even realize that the axe throwers or the javelin guys were the unique units for their armies. In my mind, the unique unit had to be a strong melee unit, which most of them were, just not all of them. Hey look, I got the entire bottom of the map now. The Giant Troll, the most recognizable unit here. It can 1v1 anyone. The best tactic here is to just move 2 meters to its side and have it ignore you. Thankfully, these things are polite enough to just stick to their lanes. The demons are naturally the bad guy faction. Well, we have 3 monster factions, but the demons are always treated as a bigger threat than the undead or the trolls. They are the only faction that starts with 4 regions instead of 3, and you have to unlock them by beating the game at least once. Their unit is the Spearmaster. The only visual difference from their spearmen is that the pitchfork is pointed downwards instead of upwards. They are basically the exact same as the Kingsguard. Orcs of the North have the Battle Axemen. Also something I didn't realize was a unique unit, mostly because of the fact that it is noticeably weaker than a Longswordsman. If the Wood Elves didn't exist, these guys would be the weakest faction. The Night Elves are actually a threat. They can get mage happy and can really just bombard the line down. But the main thing is the insanity of their unique unit, the Whirler. His stats are actually lower than a lot of the other unique units, but that doesn't matter. This Whirler isn't just an elite unit. This guy is a protagonist unit. I mean, it literally is a protagonist unit in a spin-off game. It wasn't just the one either. Every single Whirler can easily be this strong. The only reason I eventually won was because the AI just started to ignore my line entirely. I genuinely don't think I could have won if I didn't get lucky there. Well, that's done. The undead win. I played a very simple game plan. That statement about gamers optimizing the fun out of games has been constantly proven true. I mean, it was still fun, but I wouldn't do this again, at least not play it this way. It's a very exploitable game. But likely to many of its players, this may have been one of the first strategy games they have ever experienced. And in that case, learning to exploit an obvious tactic may have actually been a good overall experience. That said, a lot of the more exploitable methods were addressed in the second game. The sequel updated the art style. I mean, the first one had incredibly simplistic art, with literal dots for eyes and everybody looked like they were born in MS Paint. But at a distance, at worst, ignorable, and at best, kinda charming. Warlord 2 though, this just looks kinda off. Like it's fine, I guess, but the way the units move is now just kind of awkward. I think it's better on a technical level, but I honestly prefer the first game. I don't know, maybe it's just nostalgia. The gameplay is actually better though. Nations' capitals now have castles, so we have siege warfare now. We can also be attacked and be on the defensive for once. I don't know why, but the AI always seems to go harder when they are on offense. Some new universal units, the Ladderman, low budget siege option, siege machines, high budget siege options. Each faction has a slightly different machine. Some have trebuchets, some have battering rams, and some just have magic towers. A sorcerer for each faction. It's called something different in each army, but they are all mage-like units that actually have multiple spells, not just a generic energy ball. They even have some faction-specific spells. The trolls just drop a block of ice on you. Instead of army-wide upgrades, each unit has specific upgrades. Most of them are just armor. Some factions have unique upgrades to their nation. Every Northern Orc can get strength training, which is just a damage boost. Every Wood Elf can get lighter armor, which is a speed boost. Every Undead can get infected weapons, which debuffs units on hit, and some factions get nothing. Certain units get special moves now. This requires you to double charge your units before sending them. Spearmen can now charge, swordsmen can actually use their shields, etc. Each faction also gets a second unique unit. Men of the West now have a big shield guy, very slow but is basically immune to any range attack. Human Alliance gained a dude with a giant hammer, probably the guy that gets to have the most fun. Wood Elves gets a man with 2 swords. Night Elves get an assassin. His only attacking move is a dash and decapitate. Trolls get rock throwers. Undead gets whirlers. The Undead just straight up took the Night Elves units. Copyright law doesn't exist in this world. What are the elves gonna do about it? Orcs of the South get a samurai. I guess the previously generic orcs are Japanese now. Sure. It's a long swordsman with a fancier moveset. Orcs of the North get the warrior monk. Demons get the giant demon. It's a reskin of the giant troll and comes from the spin-off game, as do some of the other units. I can't deny that this game is genuinely better than the first one. You can still use the tactic of the line, but it is generally weaker. You need some strategy to win now. It's more of a natural game. Some of the animations do look awkward, but the additional animations for stuff like getting knocked back and charging do make the battles look a little bit better. The map does have some minor clarity issues now, but the battles themselves are very clearly defined, and in most cases you can tell what's going on. I bring this up because this is an actual issue in the next game. I don't think many people even knew that there was a third Warlord game. I love these games, but even I didn't know that this one existed. Its biggest issue is that it has the worst graphics out of the 3 games. Like really, the soldiers just seem so nondescript. I'm pretty sure that most of the universal units are the exact same model for each faction. They just changed the colors a bit. I forget who I'm fighting most of the time. Some of the units themselves just blend together as well. Tell me, is this an axeman, a longswordsman, or a great axeman? The solution the game has for this is that if you hover over the units, the game will tell you what they are. They didn't need to do that before, but now it has become necessary. The general aesthetics of this game just seems incredibly muted. I didn't like how some of the units looked in Warlords 2, but Warlords 3 just seems non-existent. Okay, let's get to the actual gameplay differences. So the main one, and I suspect the main reason for the graphical shift, is that you can now send multiple units out at once now, and you can stockpile them. Sending a unit used to reset the cooldown of the others, and you could only send one of them at a time. Now you can stockpile them. Each unit has its own cap. There is now a reason to use and buy some of the weaker units, as the more units you have unlocked, the more soldiers you have in the backline ready to be sent out. Lanes are no longer really a thing. Your soldiers now come out in general groups, and the terrain can push your soldiers around, separating them. Charges are still a thing, but now they multiply the units you have stockpiled by 10. All of this combined made it so that there are a lot more fighters on one screen at a time, which probably forced the developer to really just compromise on the graphics. I do think the game itself is a fine system. It's different, but the high increase in bodies does make it feel a lot more like a battlefield. It just kinda leans too much into the faceless soldier of that equation, and somehow it seems even simpler than the first game. So the main strategy here is to stockpile a lot of dudes and just wait for a charge to appear. So the upgrade system is simplified as well. It's back to something similar to the first game, but instead of upgrades for a specific weapon type, it's now a generic damage upgrade. The 2 unique units per faction is now back down to 1. They are mostly the originals. Wood Elves are back to Rangers, Night Elves are back to Warlords, Human Alliance is back to Kingsguard, Men of the West are back to Javelins, Trolls are back to Giants, Undead are back to Flailers. Demons keep their Giants, which means the Spearmasters are now gone. Orcs of the South keep the Samurai, so the Axe Throwers are gone. Orcs of the North gets one of the 2 new units in this game, the Great Axemen. It's an upgrade to their now gone Battle Axemen. The other new unit is specific to the new faction, the Musketmen. To make up for the 1 less unit per faction, each army now has a special spell they can use during combat. Some are better than others. Wood Elves get an arrow shower that damages everyone. Night Elves get lightning, which destroys a few units. Orcs of the North gets ground blades that will hit nothing. Orcs of the South gets an earthquake, which damages and slows. Men of the West gets a volley of rocks, which will wipe you out. Human Alliance gets a buff to all their units. The Undead raises a bunch of weak units in the middle of the field. The Trolls get a freezing wind that will stun your soldiers for an annoying amount of time. New faction gets a volley of bombs, which seems to be a strictly better version of the rock volley. Also, the other factions can now invade each other, which does make it slightly feel more like a War of Nations. And there's a speed up button now, which is a nice quality of life. Like, overall, this game was a 5 C tier. I can appreciate them trying something a little different and can see the potential, but I don't think it worked out this time. If I played this when I was younger, I don't think I would have liked it either. Well, that's all of it. Of the main games anyway. I would say the second game is the best in terms of gameplay, and the first game, strangely enough, is the best in terms of visuals. I acknowledge that my glasses may be a bit rose tinted here. This little franchise just occasionally pops up in my brain, mostly because this was one of my earliest exposures to a fantasy setting. Also an early introduction to the video game thing of commanding an army. Of course my baseline changed with time, but the first Warlord game was probably why I have a vague fondness for halberd weapons, and the spin-off game Warlord Heroes is the best game they have made, and is probably why I think dual-ended blades are the coolest weapon ever. Alright, finally got a long video out. I have no idea why this took so long.